Here we go. Meeting is being recorded. All right. Can I get a wave? Can you see my screen? All right. Very good. So just to confirm that you are in the slot that you wanted to be in, the title of this presentation is Where Do We Go From Here? A Look Back. My name is Corrie Bergeron. I am an instructional designer at Lakeland Community College. I have spent a career in educational technology, the last quarter century in higher ed. I like to say that I got in on the ground floor of ed tech, and I've been privileged to work with some of the folks that dug the basement. I got in when the Apple II was the hot new toy, and for an extra $100, you could get color, 4 of them, or sound. I spent a few years working at Plato. I have set dip switches to Genlock NTSC video, to SVGA, kind of been there, done that. For the last 20 years, I have been at Lakeland Community College, which is a small suburban community college 20 miles east of downtown Cleveland. I'm the Blackboard guy. I'm the learning systems integrator. I'm the instructional designer. Some of my colleagues call me the wizard. I suppose I've reached the point in my career where I could be, I have to retire, I think, before I can be a guru. But at this point, I think I've gained a certain amount of perspective. And my goal for the presentation today is to outline an argument that we can get a sense where this AI thing might be going in the future, actually by looking back at the history of technological innovations, because history may not repeat itself, but it does rhyme. I have an old friend who's a poet and a storyteller, and he's fond of saying, all stories are the same story, and this is that story. You may be familiar with Joseph W. Campbell and his book, The Hero with a Thousand Faces, which explains why Beowulf, Star Wars, Harry Potter, they're all the same story. You just swap out the names of the characters and the plot lines, and the costumes. It's all the same plot line. It's the hero's journey. Well, the adoption of technology historically follows a very similar pattern. So I'd like to explore that and lay out an argument for why, if we look at AI through that lens, we might be able to guess where things are going. Just last January, I presented a similar presentation to our faculty at Lakeland because AI had sprung on the scene a few months prior to that. And I called it Generative AI Threat or Opportunity. And this is only August, right? January seems like a really long time ago. This presentation is actually based on one that I gave to the National Association of Broadcasters back in the year 2000. And these are actually some of the slides that I used in that presentation 24 years ago. 1024 by 768 SVGA, man. Big, high-tech stuff. Let's take a look at some context, some historical context, what the world was like from a technology standpoint 24 years ago. Broadband was just barely starting to appear in homes. If you had internet access, and only 30% of US homes had internet access, it was with a dial-up modem. Broadband meant ISDN, which we called I Still Don't Know. Google existed, but it hadn't gone public yet. Google was the search engine that was used by Yahoo. Yahoo? Anybody remember Yahoo? Now, if you logged into a website that used multimedia, you probably had the Real Player pop up and get in your face and want to download yet another update. Real Player was big news back then. They had something like 215 million users. Amazon.com had been around for a while. They hadn't yet gone to their new logo with the arrow from the A to the Z. That was going to happen in the year 2000. They hadn't yet introduced Super Saver shipping yet. That was a few years in the future yet. The big news in 2000 was the merger between AOL and Time Warner. It was the biggest merger in history. You have $315 billion. It was ginormous. YouTube, of course, wasn't going to show up for another 7 years. Netflix was just rolling out their subscription service. And actually in 2000, they thought they were going to cash out. They tried to sell their business for $50 million to this big established video rental company. And Blockbuster turned them down. Wasn't interested. So YouTube came along in 2007. And in 2007, there was this new thing called Twitter, which had been around for about a year. And I was still having to explain it to people. Said, okay, it's like microblogging. You have 140 characters to explain what's going on. And people would look at me like I'd sprouted a second head. So I followed about 10, 15 people, mostly ed tech folks. And I had maybe 10 or 15 followers. And I thought I'd hit the big time. And one day at lunch, I'm checking my Twitter feed. And somebody posted the URL and said, hey, check this out. And the URL was to a live feed from a conference somewhere in Hawaii, I think it was. And somebody was standing at a podium giving a talk, much like I'm doing now. And somebody in the audience had taken their MacBook, turned it around on their lap, and pointed the camera at the podium and was live streaming the presentation over the web. And just by clicking the URL, I could watch. That blew my mind. I just sat there and went, oh my goodness, this is incredible. I don't have to set up an IDSN feed on Polycom equipment. I don't have to go to the special room that we have on campus and wait for somebody to call me and hook something up and type in an address to set up a live two-way feed. I can just click a link and watch it. Wow, this is cool. And then the guy giving the presentation, he was some teacher from Georgia. His name was David Warlick, and I'd really like to meet him someday because he rocked my world. He said this. He said, we are the first generation in history, talking about teachers, us teachers today. We are the first generation in history who knows that we have to prepare the next generation for a future that we know we can't imagine. Let's say that again. We are the first generation in history who knows that we have to prepare the next generation for a future that we know we cannot imagine. That hit me hard, and I have repeated this every chance I get to every teacher I get a chance to. Our students want us to teach them this stuff. Survey of Regent graduates just came out just a couple of weeks ago. 70% said that AI needs to be in their courses. More than half said their degree programs did not prepare them. And more than a third feel threatened that AI could replace them or replace their jobs. Our students want us to teach them this stuff. And they need us to teach them this stuff. Same article, 1,000 employers were surveyed. Nearly half of them said they don't expect their new hires to know this stuff. More than half said their new hires need to know this stuff. And more than half said they're more likely to interview and hire candidates who know this stuff. Guess what, folks? That means we got to know this stuff. And obviously, you know that. That's why you're here, right? We're the first generation in history who knows that we have to prepare the next generation for a future that we know we can't imagine. But this is news, right? Because growing up, we knew what to expect in the 21st century. We watched the Jetsons. I knew what the 21st century was going to be like. We're going to have flying cars, wall-sized video screens, robot maids, robot dogs, workout machines. Jane, stop this crazy thing. Pan Am was going to be flying space shuttles to the orbital space station, and we were going to have a moon base. I knew what the 21st century was going to be like. Right? Well, we sort of got some of those things. I mean, we kind of got robot maids. Maybe. There's an entire Reddit thread, cats on Roombas, right? Because there has to be. But we have robot dogs, sort of. They're not nearly as cute. They're kind of spooky. We have wall-sized video screens. We got flying cars. That's not an AI generated. That's the Joby air taxi. The FAA is writing rules right now, trying to figure out how to incorporate it into piloted operations. We have the wall-size video screens, but those things didn't change the world. They didn't change how we go about our daily lives. What did? YouTube, Amazon, Twitter, things that nobody saw coming, except maybe Howard Rheingold or the Future Shock guy. Things came out of left field. Somebody had this bright idea and it just kind of went kaboom. How did that happen? Well, history doesn't repeat itself, but it does rhyme. I'm dating myself here. Anybody recognize these guys? The great Canadian philosopher there behind the drum set, Neil Peart. This, of course, is Rush. Plus ça change, plus c'est la même chose. The more that things change, the more they stay the same. It's a great song lyric. You may be familiar with this quote. Children now love luxury. They have bad manners, contempt for authority. Children are tyrants. They have disrespect for their elders. They contradict their parents, gobble up dainties at the table, cross their legs, and tyrannize their teachers. Was it 3,000 years ago? Nothing much has changed. See, the thing is, people don't change. Human nature doesn't change. Ian Nasir was a bad businessman. He sold crappy copper 3,500 years ago. Got a 1-star Yelp review in cuneiform on a clay tablet. People don't change. Human nature doesn't change. We still need to buy things. We still need to communicate. We still want the news. The way we go about getting those things changes. But fundamental human needs, fundamental human nature, fundamental human psychology does not change. A couple more examples. London ale brewers, 1483, petitioned the city to pass an ordinance forbidding the use of hops in brewing ale, but only water, grain, and yeast, because hops cause the brew to be poisonous, unfit for human consumption, and causing drunkenness. I guess those Tudors, Henry VIII and his family, were not big fans of IPAs. 1483, huh? Now, sometimes resistance to change can turn violent. In the early 1800s, English textile workers, the people who turned wool and flax fiber into thread and fabric, broke into the factories and took sledgehammers to the machineries. They organized themselves under the banner of a fictional character they called Ned Ludd. They called themselves Luddites. Across the channel, their French counterparts threw their wooden shoes called sabots into the machinery to wreck the machinery. They were literally saboteurs committing sabotage. And these words are still used to describe activist, even violent resistance to change. And of course, you're probably familiar that when ChatGPT came out, there were people with their hair on fire saying, we have to ban it from campus, which is sort of like saying, we have to ban nitrogen from campus. We can't allow this stuff. This is my favorite quote, though. For this invention will produce folly, forgetfulness in the minds of those who learn to use it. You offer your pupils the appearance of wisdom, not true wisdom. For they will read many things without instruction, and will therefore seem to know many things, when they are for the most part ignorant and hard to get along with, since they're not wise, but only appear wise. This is Plato recounting Socrates telling the story of the god who invented writing getting dressed down by one of his fellow gods, who was not at all impressed with this new innovation of writing. People will know many things without instruction, since they're not wise, but only appear wise. But technology marches on. Things get invented. Fast forward to 250 years ago. There were these paper makers in France, the Montgolfier brothers. And they made a big paper bag and held it up over a fire and observed that it rose into the air. This was kind of cool. So they kept experimenting. They made bigger and bigger paper bags. And within a few years, they were putting on public demonstrations of ginormous, very decorated, highly decorated paper bags rising up into the air. And people came from miles around to observe this amazing phenomenon of these hot air balloons ascending into the air. Eventually, they put passengers on there, at first farm animals, because it wasn't clear whether or not a living creature could survive being lifted bodily from the earth. And then they eventually got human passengers to ride along, convicted criminals, because they were, their life was forfeit anyway. At one of these early balloon ascensions, the U.S. ambassador to France, a science-minded fellow by the name of Benjamin Franklin, went to go observe this, and he was most intrigued and amused by this. But there was a fellow standing next to him who was not at all impressed. And this fellow standing next to Ben Franklin scoffed and said, "Of what possible earthly use is this?" I mean, really, it's just a big bag of paper rising up into the air. After a while, it comes back down again. It's kind of got a point, right? Of what earthly use is this? And old Ben smiled, turned to him and said, "Of what use, sir, is a newborn babe?" And today, you can drive out to the airport and plunk down a week's salary and fly to the other side of the planet in less than 24 hours, 250 years later. Yeah, things change. Things happen. So here's the technology adoption pattern. At first, there is a novelty factor and fear and loathing. Then we use this new tool to just do the same old things, just in new ways. Because we really don't know any new way of doing things. But hey, we can do it faster, we can do it cheaper, we can make money at this. Then a transformative visionary, and there's a 50-cent word for you. Somebody comes along and says, "Hey, I can do something that's never been done before." Well, this is the adjacent possible. That's a term that was coined by Stephen Berlin Johnson, who's a science writer. Right? Really good books, highly recommended. Because now I can do this, what else can I do? It's kind of like my dad used to say when he'd get down, squat down to get something off the bottom shelf of the fridge. As long as I'm down here, what else can I get done? But you always have unintended consequences. Okay, now I can do this. What else can I do? Yeah, but something else is going to happen, and you can't predict what else is going to happen. So let's look at some examples. Early motion pictures. At first, they just set up the camera, and there were lots and lots of experiments in motion pictures. It's a fascinating, fascinating history. That would be 2 or 3 per. You could do a whole conference on early motion pictures. But at first, they just set up the camera in the audience and filmed the stage play. They just filmed the actors on the stage. And then somebody thought, what if I put the camera next to the train tracks and film the stage or film the train arriving and coming right at the camera? Well, they did that and showed the film in theaters, and audiences ran in terror from the theaters because here comes this train, and it's actually bigger than a real train. And they were totally freaked out and ran in terror from the theater. Well, but what if I like stop the camera and move the actor and start the camera then again, and like the actor just appears and disappears? It's magic. And Georges Méliès played around with all kinds of special effects like that. He put an aquarium between the actors and the camera so that King Neptune was interacting with live fish on stage. It was an amazing thing. There's a book and a movie, Hugo, that actually is about Georges Méliès, as it turns out. Great movie, great book. And just if you're a movie special effects nerd like me, you know Georges Méliès well. But I can do this. Now what else can I do? And so this is a still from his movie adaptation of Jules Verne, A Journey to the Moon. And that man in the moon is actually a live human face with a whole lot of makeup and a whole lot of set work. And the man in the moon is real upset that artillery shell landed in his eye. So somebody invents the pan head where you can move the camera around and tilt it, and dolly, you can move the camera along a track and zoom in and zoom out. And of course, these are first used for just special effects and for the shock effect and for just, oh, wow, look what I can do. This is weird and different. But then you get some visionary filmmakers who say, hey, I can use this to tell stories in a new way, like Sergei Eisenstein and Kurosawa and Hitchcock. And they develop a new language of telling stories using film. And say, hey, what if I can do this? What if I do that? And so this young guy with way more money than sense named Howard Hughes says, what if I put a movie camera on an airplane and buy up every airplane and rent every camera? I can film the greatest epic aerial battle ever done. And in 1930, he had the largest private air force on the planet waiting for clouds, because you needed clouds as a backdrop to show the action of the airplanes, because against a plain sky, they just look like models. And so he spent a good bazillion bucks of his own money. But when Hell's Angels came out in 1930, people lined up around the block to get in to see the movie. And it was a blockbuster. But you see this chart here where this technology 1 leads to the ability of technology 2, which leads to the ability of technology 3. That chart, by the way, Ethan Mollett, who I will be talking about shortly, had AI generate that chart based on some text prompts. So I can do this. What else can I do? Right, here's another example. Marconi invents wireless communication. I can send a message using a chunk of the electromagnetic spectrum. Now, if you were not part of the techno geek culture, you would not even know about this. This was not big and flashy public demonstrations like the Montgolfier balloons. You had to be part of the techno geek in-group to even know about this, because it was highly, highly technological. But if you were, you immediately saw the dollar signs, because I can communicate boring accounting information like shipping manifests and weather conditions over long distances without there need to be a telegraph wire. So I can do the same kind of thing I've been doing for decades with my railroad, except I can do it with the ships at sea. So immediately I can gain a commercial advantage over my competitors by putting a radio set on my ships at sea and communicate with them. Obviously, there are military advantages as well. Oh, by the way, there's a safety bonus. And in April of 1912, Titanic sends the first SOS message. Well, pretty soon, entrepreneurs say, hey, there's money to be made because we can make these radio receivers fairly small and fairly inexpensive, and middle-class families can afford one. And so the American Broadcasting Network and the National Broadcasting Company, et cetera, get set up. And so there in Rockefeller Plaza in New York City, there are studios built where the orchestra plays at 8 o'clock, and people will tune in to listen to the orchestra play and listen to the news being read live. And then there are players, actors who will read scripts and read dramas and read comedies, and comedians will read jokes, and people will tune in at 8 o'clock and listen live, and there will be commercials. And that's where we get the term soap opera, because these were dramatic, overblown, dramatic radio plays, and kind of operatic, even without the singing. And because Colgate and Palmolive were selling soap, they were called soap operas. So by the late 1930s, there were millions of these sets in homes all across the country because we had electricity, right? One thing enables another thing. So, and I didn't even talk about, the AC electricity versus DC electricity, but AC won out. So everybody's got these AC powered radios that they are receiving. Oh, and radio broadcast equipment is light enough that you can fit it in the trunk of an automobile, and it will run off the automobile battery as long as the engine's running. And so you can actually send a reporter out to the site of news happening, and they can report live from the field. That happened when the Hindenburg crash. You've probably heard the, oh my God, the humanity, it's crashing, it's burning, ladies and gentlemen. That was a thing, right? It was new. It was, wow, news live from the field. So 1938, just before Halloween, this guy named Orson Welles had a troupe of actors, the Mercury Radio Theater, and they had this cracker of a new script about this preposterous science fiction story about it's crazy, right? An alien invasion from Mars, right? Nobody's going to believe this actually happening, right? But it was written as though it were live reports, right, from the field, right? And there's some really good actors and some good sound effects guys, right? And a mayonnaise jar in a toilet that sounded like the lid unscrewing because, inside the toilet it's real echoey, right? So, man, they had some great sound effects guys, and it was a really great script. The rehearsal went well, so they go live and they announced, this is Mercury Radio Theater, and what you're about to hear is a radio dramatization. And so they go with it, and it's live radio, and people tuned in late. And they didn't realize that this wasn't live news reports, live from the field. New Jersey's being invaded by aliens. People went outside with their shotguns in the dark and blasted the heck out of the town water tower because the Martians were invading in giant metal three-legged monsters. The power of mass media communications was revealed for the first time. Adjacent possible unintended consequences. Data processing machines follow a similar arc. When they were first produced, they were rather large and unwieldy. They took up an entire room. They required a raised floor because all the cables would have to run underneath the floor. Dedicated air conditioning. My dad worked in these kind of rooms. My dad said he did 40 years with IBM. He never worked on a computer in his life, but he worked on a lot of data processing machines. A few decades later, you could get a pocket calculator for less than $100. less than $100, only $88.95. And that was in 1973 dollars. Now, in the mid 1970s, most parents did not approve of their middle schoolers using calculators. By golly, I had to add and count on my fingers, and you should too. Less than a decade later, most of their teachers wanted students to use calculators. And today, have you ever given your cashier an extra 12 cents so you can get a quarter back rather than pennies, right? They give it up. It ain't going to happen. So unintended consequences. So here's the thing. New technology supplants the old technology. This is going to happen. Ice was big business, right? Cutting it, storing it, transporting it, delivering it. Refrigeration units were massive. They used really toxic chemicals. But by golly, you could get a warehouse down to 20 below zero and keep it there all summer. In the early 1920s, they managed, and I can't see my notes because I only have one screen here at home. But you can look it up, and it'll be in the notes when I get the slides uploaded to the Whova site. In the early 1920s, they managed to get the condensers small enough to move it out of your basement and fit it on top of the cooling cabinet, and where the ice box used to be. My aunts referred to the refrigerator as the ice box for her entire life. Put it in the ice box. Well, that meant that these little waifs here hauling ice, they were out of a job. But whole new industries were born, right? Including the Maytag repairman, who he didn't have any work to do anyway, right? So the new technology supplants the old technology. That is a pattern that happens. So, in the theaters, suddenly there was a need for projectionists, although the guy that played the organ was out of a job. New tech overtakes the old tech, the death of film, right around the turn of the century. As the quality of digital cameras increased, it got harder and harder to buy film for your film camera. My 29-year-old son is a film aficionado, and he has to mail it off to get processed. He can no longer drop it off at the Kodak place on the corner that used to be so ubiquitous, yellow roof. Smartphones in classrooms. We've reached an equilibrium point at this point, kind of, haven't we? Right? Some of your colleagues absolutely forbid them. Some of them have them incorporated into their lesson plans. So we kind of reach an equilibrium point. But now we are dealing with a homework apocalypse, aren't we? And that got thrust upon us. And we had 0 days to figure out what to do. And we still are dealing with this. We have to really figure out what we want students to do. And in fact, I have done an entire presentation just on this. If you don't already have this book, by the way, get it. James Lang, Cheating Lessons. It tells you why students cheat. And it's not because they're bad kids. It's because you built incentives to cheat into your course. Sorry, but that's the truth. If you don't want students to use AI, give them reasons not to use AI. Or better yet, make them use AI and show them why it's garbage. Or show them how to use AI responsibly and ethically, which is really what you need to do, because that's what they need to know. They need to know how to use these tools and use them correctly and know where the boundaries need to be. And speaking of boundaries, we'll talk about that in a minute. So here's that familiar pattern, right? You've got the bell curve, the innovators, early adopters, the majority of folks that get it either early or late, and then the laggards, the ones that just put off adopting it, or the ones like some of the faculty that I work with, who literally they're going to retire before they switch to the new version of Blackboard Ultra. And they've told me that. So, okay, that's fine. And so you get this S-shaped curve of how folks adopt the technology. That S-shaped curve follows every single technology that's been adopted. You can see it. Telephones, home electricity, refrigerators, stoves, color TVs, computers, internet. What changes is the slope of the curve. They get steeper. Now, there's a couple of weird bobbles. You can see places where it drops down and it goes back up. If you look at the time scale, you can see there was this major disruption happening in the 30s and 40s, right? World War II. But you can see that, for example, the telephone took a long time to get adopted, right? People had party lines for decades. You know, why do I need a telephone in my house? I really don't need a telephone in my house. I get along just fine without it. Clothes washer, I don't really need a clothes washer in my house. A dryer, I got a solar dryer in the backyard. It's called a clothesline. Get along fine just without. Dishwasher, who needs a machine to wash dishes, right? On the other hand, cell phones, doggone handy. Internet, doggone handy. And so you get a very, very steep curve. Slightly different chart. Just take a look at, since it was invented, how long does it take to get adopted, right? Look at some of those steep graphs, right? Television took a really long time until it was commercially viable, until they could get them cheap enough to sell, and then kaboom, they took off. Any business profs in the group, you know why all of a sudden they took off like that? It's because the way they were sold and marketed, right? You give one away on the block, and within a month, everybody's got to have one. So the vertical line, the slope gets steeper over time. Now, of course, Chat GPT is just a straight up vertical line because they went to 30 million users in 30 days, 100 million users in 30 days. So that's that S-shaped curve. Here's another curve you may be familiar with. It's the Gartner hype cycle. Because something happens and everybody gets super, super excited and it's going to change the world, and then reality hits. And everybody gets really, really, oh God, this is horrible. And then people realize, you know what, this is actually pretty useful. And then we reach a plateau of productivity. Right now, with enterprise AI, big scale AI stuff, we're in the trough of disillusionment. I was just reading a couple of weeks ago that literally they used that phrase in the headline, the trough of disillusionment. And of course, a couple of weeks ago, the big 7 tech stocks took a nosedive. Again, because all the big promises, all the hype from AI, it was clear it wasn't panning out and the bubble had burst. Well, we know, because it works that way, we're going to reach this plateau of productivity. And let me see if I looks offhand, it's not. We're going to do things. We're going to use this new tool to do useful work. So what kind of useful work are we going to use? We're going to use it to do the same sorts of things we've been doing. We're just going to use it in slightly different ways to make us more effective, more efficient. So we're going to use a Copilot in Microsoft Office tools to help us write emails. We've been using spell check. We've been using grammar check, right? Look, I'm a really good writer. I'm confident that I'm a good writer. I'm a lousy typist. I rely on spell check, but I proofread because sometimes spell check picks the wrong word because my typing just is that bad. I'm a good speller. It's just I never learned to touch type, right? You're going to have a digital research assistant to help you do research. You may have an intelligent agent that you give it a goal and it goes off and pursues that goal on its own and comes back and checks in with you every few hours or every few days. AI is great for breaking the blank page. Give me 20 ideas. Kaboom, there's 20 ideas. Maybe one of them is useful. Several of them are really weird, but it's great for breaking the blank page. Show your students how to use them. It's fabulous for creating tests and assignments. Do you want to use them straight out of the box without proofreading? No fluff. But it's really useful for generating a lot of stuff really quickly that you can then throw away 50% of, but you're still saving a lot of time. Oh, and by the way, guaranteed none of those test questions show up online because they have just been generated at the point of need. Yes, you can use AI to grade student essays. That's a different question. So here's this Ethan Mollett guy I've been telling you about. If you don't have this book, get it. No, I don't get a stipend. I kind of wish I did. Because if I got $1 out of every time I've mentioned this book, I could maybe buy lunch. It's a really good book. It came out this year. I pre-ordered it. I got it today. It was released because Amazon is great like that. Right? I just ordered something while I was out at breakfast. It's going to be delivered tonight. Right? We still buy and sell. We still have needs. I want to buy things. It's just I get them in a different way. I ordered it on my phone. It's going to be delivered to my door. I don't have to go fight the crowds to go find it. We just same needs, different needs. So this is a really good book. He has a blog on Substack called One Useful Thing. Again, if you don't subscribe, fix that. Living and working with AI. And his big thing is treat AI like an alien intern. He talks about the jagged frontier of AI's capabilities. There's a boundary, a frontier that separates what AI does well inside and what AI does not do well, but humans do outside. And it's not smooth. It is really, really jagged. And I wanted to find a more jagged fort picture, but this was the best I could find in the time I had alive. It is really jagged. It's weird, the things that you would think AI would be good at, and it's not. Write a poem with exactly 50 words. It really is not very good at that. AI has no sense of humor whatsoever. Even the dad jokes are bad. Bad puns. It's just lame. Really, really lame comedy. And it's terrible at math. But analyzing huge volumes of text, summarize an entire book, yeah, it actually does that pretty well. And kind of spooky sometimes, as well as it does these things. Here's the thing. Your course, your subject area, the thing that you are the expert at, it's not an expert at. So you have to figure out how to be the expert at using AI at the thing you're expert at. Because there is no book to teach you how to be an expert at using AI at the thing you are expert at. So you have to use it in order to figure out how to use it. That's really critical. Ethan says, and from my own experience, I believe him, you need to spend at least 10 hours using it just to start figuring out how it works. And unless and until you've spent 3 sleepless nights, you kind of haven't really gotten into it. The 3 sleepless nights are, how is this really going to impact my world? And how is this really going to change how I operate and how I'm going to be operating over the next 6 months, 5 years, 15 years? And is this really a person? Because golly gee whiz, it's easy to anthropomorphize this text prediction engine. And that's all generative AI is, really. Okay. And I hope you understand that by this point. AI is just predictive text on steroids, right? It's that game you play on Facebook, right? Write a story with the next word text predictor, right? That's all it is. It's just trained on trillions and trillions of words. So here's Ethan's 4 rules of working with AI. Number 1, always use AI. Always use AI. Whatever you're doing, just use AI. Even if you don't think you need it, just use it. See what it does. 2, be the human in the loop. 3, treat AI like a person, but they're alien, like non-human. 4, this is the worst AI you will ever use. So let's review these. Number 1, always invite AI to the table. You're the only person who can figure out how to be the expert at using AI for your job. And the only way to do that is to use it. You got to do this. So do it. Number 2, you are the human in the loop, so be the human in the loop. AIs only appear to be sentient, but they're scary sentient. But you got to remember that you are the human being. You're the grown-up in the room, but you need to be the human in the loop. Don't assign things to the machine that you don't want the machine to do. Number 3, but it's awfully useful to treat it like a person, not a thing. It makes it easier to talk to if you talk to it like an alien from planet Zord. It understands English, it responds in English, but it doesn't think like a human being from any country you've ever heard of. It comes out of left field sometimes. It's like, wow, how did you learn to think? Well, it learned to think by reading things that a bunch of dead white guys and a lot of 25 and 30-year-olds wrote. That's how it thinks. So keep in mind how it was trained. Number 4, this is the worst it's ever going to be. And that's a little spooky. It's going to get better, and it's going to get a lot better, and it's going to get a lot better really fast. And the only question is how much better and how fast. I'm going to do it on time. I got to run. Co-pilots versus agents. Co-pilots have a limited purpose. They're not connected. They're dull knives. They're low utility, but they're low risk. Agents are a lot higher utility. They're very connected. They use other tools independently, but they're higher risk. They're sharp knives. They're sharp tools. So now what are the new adjacent possibilities? Well, you've probably heard about deep fakes. Then there's the dead web phenomenon, where things are created by AI and consumed by AI. I use AI to create my assignment. The student uses AI to write their assignment. I use AI to grade the assignment. The student uses AI to write their resume. I use AI to write the recommendation letter. The HR department uses AI to scan the resume and the recommendation letter. Is there a human in the loop anywhere at all? Are we facing the end of authenticity? Are we facing the end of humanity? Do we have an existential generational epistemological crisis? Or maybe you saw this this Twitter thread, X, excuse me. So weird interaction with a student this week. They kept coming up with weird facts like Greek is a combination of 4 other languages. What? So let's look this up. And they said, okay, I'll open a search bar. And they opened Chat GPT. I said, that's not a search bar. He said, yes, it is. You can search for anything. Great. Each individual kid is now hooked into a nonsense machine. They're getting unique wrong facts. They're sure they're correct because they're doing what we told them to do. They looked it up. They think they learned it. He couldn't believe me because he was following my directions. I'm just some random human, and here's the whole internet telling him I'm wrong. Yeah, maybe. What are the unintended possibilities? And you may think that Wally over there is really cute. But remember, Wally was alone on a planet Earth that had been absolutely destroyed and was left uninhabitable, and the humans had to go live on a space liner where they all weighed 400 pounds and were served by robots feeding them milkshakes. So maybe we'll replace human teachers with magical textbooks, huh? This is a postcard, a French postcard from the year 1900, depicting a classroom from the year 2000. Malik says that AI isn't going to replace teachers, but in fact will make classrooms more necessary. It may force us to learn more facts, not fewer, but it will destroy the way we teach before it improves it. So we got 4 possible futures he lines out. Things will just kind of stay the way they are, capabilities plateau, or we might have linear growth, or we might have exponential growth, or we might reach artificial general intelligence, AGI, Jarvis, like in Iron Man, or Skynet from Terminator. There's something kind of fun. In the Terminator movie, they made that movie is from 1984. That was set in present time. The movie was set in present time, 1984. And the hero comes back in time to warn his mother, who hasn't yet gotten pregnant with him, that the machines are going to rise up and create this global intelligence that's going to destroy humanity, and she has to stop it. John Connor has come back in time to warn his mother, Sarah Connor. And this murderous machine, played by Arnold Schwarzenegger, that same with his skin off there on the left, has come back to destroy her, to prevent him from being born. And so he's explaining all this to her, and she looks at him like he's nuts and says, "But machines can't do that." And he looks at her and says, "No, Mom, but in about 40 years," that was in 1984, 40 years ago. Yeah. So you can look at these slides. McKinsey is a forecasting company, they're a big consulting company, and they look at 4 things when they look at scenarios: demographic trends, economic actions, unsustainable trends, and things that are just going to happen. Demographics, they're real, and we ought to pay attention to those. This is some interesting demographics. In about 12 years, Nigeria and Pakistan are going to pass Indonesia. And then in about 25 years, they're going to pass the US in terms of population. But what's really interesting is you look up at the top of the graph and look at what China and India are going to do. And to think about what that can do in terms of workflow and where things are manufactured and global economics, not to mention your military security stuff. And you're saying, "Oh, Corey, like I got to get ready for next week, fall semester." Okay, yeah, right. But who else is buying school supplies this week? The graduating class of 2035 is starting kindergarten, and they're going to be in your classrooms if you're a college student when Nigeria and Pakistan cross that line of Indonesia. So yeah, this stuff happens fast. My baby girl turned 21 this summer, and my eldest son got married. So stuff happens fast. Economics, what goes up must come down. Cycles happen. Booms go bust. Trees don't grow to the sky. That, by the way, is not AI art. That's real art from an artist on DeviantArt. Just wanted to point that out. So trends don't go on forever. They eventually reverse. And probably nobody's going to get the Seinfeld joke. That had to happen, right? That was one of his lines. Things happen, right? Administrations change. Elections happen. Power outages happen. What do you know? Stuff happens. So be prepared for it. Plan for it. Even if you don't know exactly what's going to happen, you know that things are going to happen. There is a marvelous tool that Ethan made. The link will be in the slides, but it uses the steep model, and you can plug in and get a forecast along the social, technological, economic, environmental, and political axes of where things might go if AI stays the same, slow growth, exponential growth, or goes really pear-shaped. Here's the thing, predictions are really hard, especially about the future. But some things don't change. Human nature doesn't change. But you know what? I still want my moon base. I still want my moon base. So thanks for coming this afternoon. I will be delighted to continue our conversation. I will be happy to connect with folks online. There's my contact info. I will have the slides uploaded to the Whova site. I apologize for being a little unavailable the last few days, but like I said, the power has been out. It literally came on 15 minutes before curtain. So thank you all for coming. I really appreciate you coming, and y'all have a great day.
Thank you so much, Corey. That was wonderful. Thank you so much.